intro slide. Again, my name is Paul Berry. I live in Wake Forest, North Carolina, right outside of Raleigh. And part of my responsibility at Toshiba is I get to speak with people like yourself. I get to speak with grocers coast to coast, mainly in North America, about retail solutions, right? The challenges that they're having, how do you solve them? And I can tell you, self-checkout continues to explode. And most retailers are looking for self-service. So the good thing is I get to hear it from all different aspects of different retailers, both big and small. I do focus in the mid-range and smaller grocery segment. I don't call on the big guys. I call mainly on mid-range and smaller independent grocers. And I work with our business partners like STCR to help implement those solutions. So we kind of got a packed agenda today, but I can tell you right now, every grocer I talk to is either doing self-checkout or taking a serious look at it. So with that, I'm going to come off video so you can kind of focus on the charts. And here's what I'm going to dive into. And I believe STCR will make these charts available to those that want to kind of dig deeper into them. So I'm not going to assume everybody knows who we are. I will say this, if you're an existing Toshiba customer, thank you. We appreciate your business. I guess May will be 40 years for me between IBM and Toshiba, so I've been doing this a long time. And those of you that have been purchasing Toshiba gear and IBM gear prior to that, thank you for your business. Next, we'll talk about industry trends, kind of where things are going in the world of self-service. What do you got to do to remove friction from the front end? Nobody likes to wait in line. So how can you alleviate some of that in your stores? We're here to talk about self-service. So we'll talk about self-checkout, but you can't talk about self-checkout without talking about loss prevention. Nobody wants shrink. So how do you marry the two together to give the right shopping experience? So we'll kind of dovetail into that. And then how do you control it all, right? It's a different technology. It's a newer technology. So how do you wrap it all together? And that's where the back office system server comes into play. But at the same time, how do you implement, right? So we'll talk a little bit about managed services, and then we'll kind of wrap it all up. So for those of you that don't know the history, I'm going to spend about 2 seconds on who we are, where we came from. So back in 2012, IBM decided to divest their retail business along with other businesses that they were divesting, like PCs and laptops and printing systems. And Toshiba was looking to expand. So Toshiba purchased IBM Retail Store Solutions, and we became Toshiba Global Commerce Solutions. So about 2,000 of us plus came over around 2012. That included all of the intellectual property, all of the products and things like that. So under Toshiba in North America, we have two organizations, two separate companies. One of them is on the left, Toshiba Global Commerce Solutions, which is the retail segment. And then you have Toshiba Business Solutions on the right-hand side, which is your printing systems, copiers, and things like that. Why do I tell you this? I tell you this for one reason. If you go out into the malls today, into the grocery stores today, any shopping establishment that has point of sale, if you still see that IBM logo on that equipment, that kind of goes to show how long our equipment lasts. We did this transition again in 2012. It is now 2024. So you got to figure that equipment was probably installed a couple of years prior. So my point here is we are a leader in the industry, as you see on this chart here. Under Toshiba, Toshiba continues to invest into us the same way IBM did. We have several development centers throughout the world. You'll see on the bottom left-hand side of the chart. On the bottom right-hand side of the chart, we're headquartered out of Durham, North Carolina, right outside of the Raleigh area. And Rance Polar is our CEO, and he's got a real big focus on, obviously, our channel business and working with our channel partners. These are just a couple of the larger accounts that we do business with. If you go into these accounts, you're going to see our hardware and in most cases our software installed in these. But 60% of the top 25 worldwide retailers today use our systems. Here's just kind of another bragging chart, and I'll kind of be off the soapbox. But basically, we've been #1 in retail back since the 70s, right? But since I'm a grocery guy, I only focus in grocery. I love the last bullet on the chart. 9 out of the top 10 U.S. grocers use our systems today. So whether you're in a Kroger or a Walmart, they're running our systems today, which just goes to show the systems that STCR is talking to you about is the exact same equipment and solutions that these other larger worldwide retailers are using. And last but not least, here's our product setup. So if you're not using our systems today, I would highly encourage you to get with STCR and kind of get some of your questions answered and to see if any of these solutions kind of fit within your environment. So let's dive in. What's causing change? So, I continue to collect articles that come out in the trade rags about retail in general. And we still know that increasing labor rates continue to drive change in the retail space. I was out in California about a month ago, and they're talking about changing that minimum wage again, right? And it just keeps changing. So if you're not at $15 an hour yet, I'm sure you will be. So that obviously causes retailers to rethink their strategy. But not only is the rates changing, but now you have competition down the street. So here's an example of Target, right? Starting pay at $24 an hour. So you as a retailer, you're trying to figure out how do you digest that additional labor cost. One of the later reports, Lampert reports, basically said that, you know, the top number one concern of grocery CEOs is labor. You just can't find it. There's such a shortage out there. This chart is an interesting one. I used to use this all the time as far as what's causing self-service to grow, right? You know, before it was, hey, millennials like using self-service. They don't want to talk to cashier. Most shoppers would prefer to use self-service. People would gravitate towards self-service if lines were too long. But the ironic thing is now you just can't find the labor, which is crazy. And that's really what's driving a lot of the self-service growth that we've seen. Here's a most recent stat, right? Not sure where you fit as a retailer into this stat, but 94% of grocers are either doing self-checkout, are considering doing self-checkout, or are in the process of doing it, right? So that leaves a very small percentage, right? 6% that right now are not doing anything about it. So with that, I want you to think about it. That's 6%. It doesn't mean there's a problem. It just means that those retailers that aren't even considering it, and you may be one of them, you just don't have enough information. That's kind of the way I look at it, is you don't have enough information to make a decision on self-service. So hopefully by the time I get done, I would have answered a lot of your concerns and questions. And I always like to say, whenever I hear a retailer say, you know what, self-service is not for me, we're all about customer service, that just tells me that they need a little more education on what self-service is all about. So let's kind of move on here. Hold on, I lost my mouse. These are some larger chains that are currently rolling out our System 7 self-checkout, which is our 4th generation. As you can see, these are a lot of names that you recognize. Most of these are national chains. They continue to roll out System 7 in their stores, but these are all independent grocers. These are small grocers, 1 to, let's say, 20 or 30 or 40 stores, right? So you may be on this list, and if you are, thank you. But these are all smaller retailers that have adopted our System 7 self-checkout, or possibly System 6 previous generation, that are having success with our solutions. And at the end of the day, I'm sorry, I keep getting this poll thing popping up. At the end of the day, most shoppers would prefer to shop in the store, right? So we know that 8 out of top 10 shoppers would prefer to shop in the store versus online, right? We always like to say e-commerce shopping is great, but interfacing with a screen doesn't necessarily give you good customer service. It doesn't give you the right experience. So if you can get those shoppers in your store, you're going to drive a higher basket rate, because now you have people in the store to assist that shopper. There'll be impulse buying. So the real question is, when they come into your store, how do you make it a more pleasurable experience and remove that point of contention, which is usually on the front end because they have to wait? So here's what we've seen, right? A lot of the retailers that were, you know, I don't want to really say early adopters, but they were kind of the first ones out of the gate doing self-checkout. Some of them did 4, now they're moving to 6, right? We've seen some retailers go to 80% self-checkout in their store. We see that time and time again. Maybe they're mixing different types of things. Maybe they're opening up stores with self-checkout as the only path to get out. We've seen Walmart do tests that have self-checkout only. We've seen Albertsons kind of do the same thing. Like I said, I live in North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina. Harris Teeter, which is a chain that Kroger bought a few years ago, they actually implemented self-checkout across the entire front end, and they didn't eliminate any jobs. And you might ask yourself, why in the world would a retailer save all that labor by moving to self-service and not eliminate any jobs? We'll talk about that here in a second. But here's the punchline. I think you've all have seen this over the last couple of months. I know I have. I hear about it every day from my customers and my partners, and that is Walmart's ripping out self-checkout, so is Costco, so is Wegmans. They're all abandoning self-checkout. We know that's not true. Basically, what they're doing is, if you really peel back the onion on this stuff, they're rethinking their strategy. They're saying, did we go too far? Did doing a store only with self-service, was that crossing the line and went too far? Doing 80% self-checkout, was that too far? And the answer is yes, right? You got to have a balance. You have to have a mix. So the good news is some of these big chains went too far, and thank God that the smaller regional grocers, independent grocers can learn from their mistakes, right? But at the same time, we weren't in that store. We don't know why did they do that? Did they do that out of desperation because they couldn't get labor? They had no choice if they wanted to keep the lights on in that store. So my point here is no, self-checkout is not being abandoned. They're just rethinking the strategy on how they did it. I know Target and Dollar General are two perfect examples where their strategy has changed, and now they're looking at self-service as an express only device, right? So 10 items or less, 12 items or less. So again, it's not a one size fits all, and that's where you got to work with STCR to look at your environment to say, okay, what are you trying to solve for with self-service? Does it make sense for you as a retailer? And do you need more express lanes? Do you want to handle bigger baskets? And based on that analysis, they will recommend what's the best fit for your environment. And that's extremely important to do the upfront homework. So how do you
Hello,
move? Yep, I'm here.
sorry, Paul.
It's okay.
According to our poll, we have a good amount of attendees that have self-checkout installed.
Okay.
Majority that are on this call today, just to let you know.
All right, good deal. Sounds good. Hopefully by the time I get done, they'll maybe install some more as we get through this. So thanks, Angel. So, how do you remove frustration and friction from your store? So we know by providing a self-service experience, you're really going to give your shoppers choice and control. And that's extremely important. And what I mean by that is you can't give them choices and control if you only have self-checkout as a means to getting out of the store. You got to give them an option to use traditional lanes and self-checkout lanes, right? Give them that private checkout experience. But most importantly is this: by having self-checkout and having enough self-checkouts, you're going to remove that spike that you might get on the front end where you're trying to absorb some of that front end business. By having self-checkout, you're going to kind of smooth out that front end, and you'll be able to really reduce queue times without increasing your labor costs. And the big winner here is if you can redeploy the labor. Those of you that implemented SCO in the past, hopefully you've redeployed that labor, because the reason why is this: we know that 50% of shoppers come in your store, don't know everything they want while they're in the store. 93% normally can't find somebody in the aisle to help. 85% would buy more if they got the help, and 90% would return to your store. But the staggering number is this: 90% of the people would leave without buying anything if they didn't find it and they couldn't get the help. But 80% of the retailers reported that they've seen an increase 20 to 50% per transaction if they got the help. So the moral of that story is, if you can redeploy labor at point of selection versus eliminating the labor, assuming you can get the labor, you're going to love your results, because here's our goal, right? Reduce labor costs, redeploy the labor to other areas of the store. You're going to improve that shopping experience, right? You're going to increase loyalty. You're going to increase wallet share, which implies you're going to increase revenue and customer satisfaction. And that's the ultimate goal. And why does this work? Well, think about it, right? When you walk into a store, you're going to be on the left-hand side. It's going to be one-to-one queuing in most cases, right? If you don't have self-service, you got one cashier, one lane, people waiting in line. By doing self-checkout, whether it's 1 to 4 or in this case 1 to 6, you have one line going in with, let's say, 4 or 6 ways to get out. So from the customer's perception, the line is moving faster, so they're getting out of the store faster. And that's what it's all about, right? Think of yourself at a red light, or you're in the wrong security line at TSA, or whatever the case is. But my point is, if your line is moving, you're fine. If your line's not moving, you're not fine. So by giving a 1 to 4 situation or 1 to 6 situation, you got more flow going through that store. And that's why, from a customer perspective, they prefer to use self-checkout in a lot of cases, because they don't like to wait in line. So, where do you start to kind of road to transformation really is here. You're on the left-hand side of the chart. You're skeptical. You're not sure if it's going to work for you or not. And then what we always recommend is do a pilot, right? Follow our direction. Listen to what we have to say. We'll make some recommendations, and we say do one store. If you have success in the store, then you can start moving to the right. Wegmans is a perfect case study for us. They were very skeptical years and years ago. We're all about customer service. We don't want self-checkouts, da-da-da-da-da. They tried it in the prepared food areas. They had great success, so they started putting them on their front end. They did 4, they did 6. There's a Wegmans store up here in Wake Forest. I believe they have, I want to say 12 self-checkout lanes, 2 banks of 6, and then they have 14 POS lanes. I know that's a large front end, but my point is, they're at about 50-50, right? And that's their sweet spot. And they've proven that it seems to work in this location, which brings me to another point. And this is something we normally get into when we talk about best practices. Just because something works successfully in one store doesn't mean it works like that in all stores. So you got to kind of look at it, and we'll help you kind of massage that through. So let's get a quick introduction of System 7. I'm going to play a short video, and then we'll kind of dive in. All right, hopefully I gave you a little idea what System 7 is all about. So if we take a step back a little bit, this is our 4th generation of self-checkout. And we went out to our clients, we went out to our business partners, and we said, what would you like to see different in the next generation of self-checkout? And this is how System 7 was kind of born, right? Purpose built. So what I mean by that is our goal was to have something extremely reliable, but at the same time, have it very easy to service. So the same touchscreen that's on the self-checkout is the same one that we use in our POS system, the same printer, the same system unit inside the lane. So again, common parts where it made sense. So from a serviceability, reliability, again, it's very retail hardened, got human factors involved as well to make sure it's a modern looking device, not just something, big and bulky and kind of like a box type thing. Very flexible in design. So, depending on what you configure and install today, if you wanted to change something on it later on, you have that capability. Maybe the bagging on it, maybe whether you want to accept cash or not, those are options that you can change later on. And then obviously all the necessary tools that would go with the system are included with it as well. Here's some of the different self-service devices that we offer. So on the far left is our hybrid ProX kiosk. So this is a tabletop unit, card only, built-in scanner, built-in printer. As you can see, it's spinning away there. Again, this is, think of customer service counter, maybe deli area if you want to take payment type thing, maybe quick food bar or whatever it may be. So again, that runs the exact same software if you wanted to as the regular lane itself. Second from the left is kind of a freestanding kiosk. And then we're going to focus on the two on the right. So one accepts cash and the other one does not. Here's kind of a snapshot of some of the models. This is obviously not all of the models. This kind of gives you about 70% of the different configurations that we have. The only difference between the ones on the top and the ones on the bottom, the ones on the top accept cash and the ones on the bottom do not. Other from that, the only big change really is what kind of bagging do you need? Do you want small form factor? Do you want large form factor? Are you trying to handle large basket sizes, medium, small? Are you going to do paper bags? Are you going to do reusable bags? These are all of the puts and takes that you got to think about when you're configuring a system. And that's really where the STCR team will come in and help you configure what makes sense for that store in that location, because it may be different in other locations. You can't talk about hardware without talking about software. That's kind of the secret sauce that makes it work. And the good thing about the software is this. The software that runs on the self-checkout, it's actually running the point of sale business logic inside the self-checkout, right? So you have some self-checkout software that runs in there as well. Why is that important to you? What's good to know is this. The self-checkout lane looks just like a point of sale lane on the back end to your system, right? So it doesn't have its own set of pricing. It doesn't have its own set of item descriptions. It pulls all that from your point of sale server. So you don't got to worry about trying to keep things in sync. We've already taken care of that for you. The integration's already done. The only thing you got to do is plug it in and let it play pretty much. So all that integration is done. You don't need to worry about it. So if it worked in point of sale, most of the features that work in point of sale will work in self-checkout, but at the same time, you got to do your due diligence up front to make sure, especially when it comes to things like loyalty, that everything is supported, that you want it to be supported as far as base product. If not, it could be an enhancement that's required on the self-checkout side. So the main software that runs inside the self-checkout lane that handles the user interface is called the check application. And that's really there to hopefully get you through the transaction without getting stuck, right? So it's got a lot of intelligence built into the software to hopefully the shopper will solve their own errors during the transaction. But it is smart enough to know that if you get enough security errors to stop the lane, right? So for an example, if it's an age restricted item, it's not going to stop you. It's going to say, hey, keep going and we'll check your ID at the end of the transaction. So again, the goal here is to get you through the transaction without stopping. From a security perspective, there's several things we're going to talk about here on security. The first one is kind of the built-in security that we have with the lane. So when you purchase the lane, it doesn't know the weight of any product. No, you don't have to send every product through the self-checkout to get it to learn it. It's going to learn it over time. And once it has enough sampling of a certain UPC, it's going to lock it into the weight database. And that way, the next time that product comes through the lane from a shopper, if it doesn't fall within that weight range for that specific UPC, it's going to flag an error. It's going to be, an incorrect weight in the bagging area, for example. And that's where the shopper assistant may have to come over and validate it. Our system is smart enough to know that, back in the day, retailers, or not retailers, but manufacturers used to add 10% more, keep the same UPC. Now they take away 10%, keep the same UPC. But we're smart enough to have multiple weight ranges for every product. So we're able to handle that to try to limit the interventions if necessary. But one thing that's unique to us, and it's really patented algorithms that we have, is overlaying the weight security with shopper behavior. So what exactly does that mean? So let's say a shopper walks up, you're scanning items, everything's going great, no issues, and then they put their purse or their umbrella into the bagging area. Well, we know the lane's going to say, hey, please remove unscanned item. Well, let's say the shopper ignores it, didn't pay attention, keeps on going. As long as that shopper removes that unscanned item from the bagging area, be it their purse or umbrella, it's not going to stop the lane. They'll be able to tender out, everything's great, they solve their own problem. So our goal here with the software is to kind of measure the shrink versus the convenience and kind of get a happy medium in between to not allow shrink to occur, but at the same time keep security going. But you can change the level of security per lane if you wanted to. If you wanted to tighten it down more, you could. If you want to loosen it up more, you have that option. If it has the name of the product on file, it'll save it, or I'm sorry, it'll announce it. And as far as PLUs, you can limit how many times a PLU can be repeated, right? So maybe bananas 4011, you only let them use it one time versus 2 times to kind of prevent some theft with bananas. We handle bulk items. So why is that important? Well, think about it, right? You got a case of water, you have a big bag of dog food, for example. You don't want the shopper grabbing that thing out of the cart, waving it in front of the scanner scale and dumping it into the bagging area. You can flag this one time into the weight database to say, hey, this particular UPC is a pass around item. We don't want the weight in the bagging area, so it'll instruct the shopper when they scan it to leave it in their cart, right, with the hand scanner. Maybe optional pass around items, things like floral greeting cards. If it shows up in the bagging area, great. If it doesn't, it's not going to flag an error. I always recommend going with a hand scanner, whether you go with a Bluetooth scanner or a corded scanner, it's really your choice. But the nice thing about the hand scanner is if it's configured to talk to the scanner scale, it follows the same security. So if the product that they're scanning with the hand scanner is required to go in the bagging area, it'll tell them put it in the bagging area, even if they scanned it with the hand scanner. So again, just providing your customer flexibility when they're scanning their orders. The software does run in 3 different modes of operation. Number 1 is full security. That's what we've been talking about so far. So it has weight security turned on, audio prompts, all that good stuff. There's shopper speed mode. So basically that means I'm going to turn off all weight security, something I don't ever recommend you do. That's what Walmart does. They're not too much worried about shrink. I would recommend you never do that. The only use case I can think of is maybe you're having a technical issue with the weight security scale and you want to keep the lane operational and you temporarily turn off this feature to let the lane stay open while you wait for service to come in and fix the lane. And then there's cashier speed mode. So what is that? That is the case where maybe day before Thanksgiving, you're going to get really busy. You want to convert 1 or 2 of the SCO lanes into a regular POS lane, plant a cashier there. Obviously, it should be a cash accepting lane. And let a cashier run the operation, right? Let the customer pay, but let the cashier do all the scanning and all that good stuff. So you have your choice of converting that lane into a regular POS lane. What are all the pretty lights? The pretty lights are really there to guide the shopper through the transaction, right? So as you get to the lane, all of the LED lights will be on around the display, around the devices. As you start the transaction will just be around the display. When it's time to do a coupon, it'll be around the coupon sensor slot. And then when it's time to pay, around the payment devices, be it PIN pad or cash. So we're kind of guiding the shopper through. And then with the screens, we've done a lot of work to remove as much clutter as we can, right? So you have your configurable logos at the top, your scrollable receipt, your weight information at the bottom, message bar, instructing the shopper what to do next, a picture showing them what to do next, and then you have your button area and then your help bar at the bottom where they can change the language, change the volume, request help. If they do need to enter in a PLU number and they want to do it manually, they can do it either by typing in the number, looking up the product image, or typing in the name of the product. This is where you're going to get your flip chart up there with a quick item lookup, and this is where you would work with STCR to organize the format of the screen so they can quickly find the non-scannable items in your store, right? You want to make sure anything that's non-scannable gets on these charts so they can quickly find it simply within 1 or 2 keystrokes. If you are doing reusable bags, we always recommend going with a reusable bag option. You can do it with or without plastic bags. It's really your choice on how you configure it. It'll instruct the shopper what to do so we can weigh those bags because again, you have weight security in the area. On the right-hand side, paper bags, right? Same situation. If you're going to do paper bags, they have a weight to them and you can decide whether you want to charge for them or not. It's all configurable in the software, but that's all part of the base feature package if you want to take advantage of it. So let's talk about loss prevention, right? You can't talk about self-service without talking about shrink. We're doing a lot of things when it comes to loss prevention, especially in the form of AI, right? There's a lot of things happening in the world of AI today, as we all know, and we're taking advantage of that with some of these different technologies. So these are some of the things that we have either implemented or are working on. So things like produce rec, item identification, biometric age verification, and bottom of the basket. And we're doing them in phases, right? So really, phase 1 is produce recognition. I'm going to show you a demo of that solution, which is available today. This is where we're going to recognize the produce item as they put it on the scanner scale. The next one is SCO behavior. So this is where we're doing a top-down view over the scanner scale to see, is the customer trying to fake scan the system? We call it a ghost scan, right? We're going to be able to identify that customer's motion by doing that. Our goal is to start integrating all of these new technologies together to work in harmony together to help improve the loss prevention approach. Bottom of the basket, we're not talking about recognizing products per se versus, hey, there's something under there. Let's stop the transaction, make the shopper identify what that product is, and then continue the transaction. So that's on our roadmap. And then another camera pointing into the bagging area. And our goal here is once we get to that point of the roadmap, our goal is to possibly have that piece along with the produce rec and the overhead camera to remove the need for, let's say, weight-based security, right? So now we have a complete snapshot of that product from inception, from going across the scanner scale into the bagging area and identifying it. So that's kind of our ultimate goal on the roadmap. And then there's also the PVM camera, so a personal video monitor. So this is where you have a camera mounted to the screen and it's showing the shopper's face on the actual touch screen itself. The software for that, there's an additional cost for that software feature, but my point is you want some type of visualization of the shopper shopping in that area. This is something we get into more when we teach on best practices. But again, you want the shopper to know they're being watched, right? Whether it's through cameras, screens, and things like that. And that's just part of it. So let's talk about produce rec. Why do we do produce rec? Well, we know not every product has a barcode, right? So how do you solve for that, right? Think about it. You're a shopper, you got a load of produce items. The last thing you want to do is go to the self-checkout, right? You don't want to get stuck. So how do you eliminate that concern with the shopper to go drive more business through there? And at the same time, how do you avoid the shrink? How do you prevent the shopper from calling everything a banana using a 4011 PLU number, right? So these are different things that we try to solve for. So the neat thing about produce recognition is it'll increase the adoption of using SCO. It speeds up the transaction, and it really will minimize the shrink at the SCO lane with some loss prevention features that are built into it. And the way we've done it is we've developed some computer vision with AI technology, and all of the smarts are in the camera. Now, I can't tell you how important that is. What I mean by that is when you use our produce recognition solution, it's not going off to a server somewhere to look at the produce and say, hey, what is this? All of that technology is built in the camera. The produce items are stored in the camera. So the latency of finding the right produce item is already there at the lane. It's not somewhere in the cloud or in the back office. So it's extremely fast. It's a camera that's pointing down onto the scanner scale. It's visualizing what's there, and then it's putting the pieces together. So kind of the process here is at the top left. You place the produce item on the scale, computer vision takes over. The retail vision looks at it, tries to identify what it is. We're going to show on the screen, instead of 30 items, we're going to show maybe one item, maybe 4 items, up to 4 items. Shopper will select it, and then you move on. Underneath the covers, we're collecting all of that data, right? We're aggregating all of the data from your store along with all the other Toshiba customers running produce recognition, and we're building new models. We're letting the models get smarter. The more it gets used, the smarter it gets. You may have produce items that are unique to your area, so we need to learn those items. So about 4 times a year, we're taking all of the aggregated data from all of the stores that we have using the product, we're consolidating it, and we're sending down a brand new model of produce items to, again, speed up the system, minimize the errors, give better selections, right? So it's constantly learning what the customer picked based on what it saw, based on what's on the screen. So it continually gets smarter. So with that, I'm going to take a drink of water. I'm going to let you guys watch this real live video. So I'll set this up before I hit the play button. So on the left-hand side is the actual picture of the self-checkout screen. The top right, obviously, is a picture of the self-checkout. And on the bottom right is what the camera is seeing on that scanner scale. So if you have existing Toshiba self-checkouts, whether it's System 6 or System 7, you can retrofit these in the field to have that camera looking down. If you have a System 6, it's right under the screen. If you have a System 7, it's on the left-hand side of the screen where it's pointing down onto that platter of the scanner scale. So let me let this play.
Today we're going to show you the Toshiba Produce Recognition Solution. For the demo, we're running a System 7 unit that's running our check software along with a Toshiba Edge camera that's actually doing the computer vision algorithms on the camera itself. Let's get started. In order to enter produce using self-checkout, again, you indicate that you're entering produce. You put your item on the scale. The system recognizes the item. For items that have both organic and non-organic items, both are shown for the shopper to choose. Here, we'll select our bananas, add them to the cart. The solution also works with bags. So here we have an avocado put in a bag. Select produce recognition. The item gets recognized. We add it to our cart. We also recognize items that are in a reusable bag. So here we have oranges. Put them on the scale. Request the system to identify them. and it does identify the items. So the other feature of the solution is allowing the shopper to correct their own mistakes that they could have inadvertently made while shopping. So here, we'll put garlic on the scale, allow the system to identify it. Let's assume the shopper says they don't want to use that item, they want to key the PLU in themselves. They inadvertently enter the wrong item number. So what the system will do will show them exactly what the camera observes, the item they entered, and what the system selects as the actual item on the scale. Here, the shopper can easily correct their mistake and enter the correct item. Next, loss prevention in terms of customers that are not making accidental mistakes. In this example, they're trying to purchase a steak for a banana. They put the steak on the scale. Enter the produce. The system does not recognize the item, so the shopper can key in their own item number. So here we're keying in bananas. The system shows what was actually on the scale, the item that the shopper entered, so they know that they've been caught. They can continue down this path and say they want to select the bananas anyway. Once they put the item in the bag, the shopper assistant is called over to be able to address the situation. Once they scan their shopper assistant card, we show the item image of the steak. We show that the shopper entered the banana, so the shopper assistant can void the item at this point in time to continue the transaction. That's Toshiba's produce recognition solution.
All right, and a lot of times people ask me, what about organic items? So again, it depends on how it's being identified. So let's say if your organic items do have a green band around them or whatever the case is, as the system gets smarter, it'll start to recognize, hey, this is an organic item and show that item all the time. If you're running our Toshiba Ace point of sale product at the front end lane, the exact same thing you just seen at the self-checkout lane is available at the front end lane. So we mount the camera. If you're running a DataLogic 9800i, we actually mount that IoT produce rec camera inside the top-down imaging stock. And again, it runs the exact same software, and your cashier will be able to, again, find the produce just by hitting a button, letting it identify it, and putting it up on the screen. So that's available with our Ace product. So if we look at the next solution as part of the security stack, Alera Security Suite, is the overhead camera. So what is the overhead camera? This is a camera that's pointing down. This is available. It was announced in the middle of December for both System 6, System 7. There's a camera mounted right on your transaction awareness light pointing down. And what it's doing is it's got a scan zone around the scanner scale. So it's looking for customer behavior over the scanner scale. We call it ghost scanning. So in the world of self-checkout, you may have a shopper that comes in there and they may have a product, right? And they fake scan the system and put their hand over the barcode and pretend like they're scanning it and put it into the bagging area. So the objective behind this solution is really to detect that scenario. This is available today. I'm going to show you a quick little test video that we did in a proof of concept. Now, I want you to watch this. In that green circle, you're going to see a misscan. So that's when the system had detected a misscan. And what happens is when a misscan occurs, the lane will stop. It'll show the shopper what they did from the overhead. Hey, you misscanned an item. Would you like to correct it and scan the item? And obviously, if they say no, we will keep the lane stopped. If they say yes, they scan the item, everything moves on their way. But if you look at this one, it's kind of interesting because this person is intentionally trying to steal, not making an honest mistake with the system. So as you look, she grabs an item, pretends like she scans it, looks around, didn't really scan it, threw it in the bag, and now you see misscan in that area. So that use case is available today where, you know, whether it was an honest mistake or not honest mistake, it caught them fake scanning the system, again, through that AI technology. The next turn of the crank is other use cases that we're looking at, and that is going from your cart to the bagging area or from the cart somewhere else, bypassing the scanner scale altogether. So this is where we're widening the zone area that it's monitoring to catch theft in those two situations. So I'll show the one on the right, and this one is where she's going to go right from her cart directly to the bagging area, and then you're going to see a misscan flag up in that green circle. So it's going to catch her and obviously stop the lane when she does that. So if you look at the one on the right, it's probably my favorite one. This is the one where she's scanning items. She pulls a hat out of the bag and says, you know what, I'm just going to put it on my head instead. Doesn't even put it in the bagging area. There you see a misscan in that area. So those are, again, future use cases. I think according to the technology team, the goal is to have those use cases announced hopefully by the end of this year. Again, same hardware technology. It'll just be a software enhancement. As far as a personal video monitor, you got some choices there. This is one that mounts to the screen. You need a separate piece of software that runs on the lane to get it to show the person's face on the screen. These two other ones are external. So again, these are standalone monitors that you would add to the transaction awareness lights so the shopper can see themselves shopping. So again, more on the best practice side of it, but make sure you're doing something so the customer knows they're being watched, whether it's at the actual lane or in the courtyard area of the self-checkout systems. So a couple of things, there's about 16 different ways we try to prevent interventions. I don't have time to talk about them today. We can dig deeper if you'd like to do that, but here's just kind of a list of those 16 different things. We've already talked about a couple of them. The shopping experience, again, the shopper assistant is key. So that's a person that's with the lanes all the time. You do not want that shopper assistant hiding behind the podium, also known as the vacation station. If you put a podium there, just push it off to the side, put a point of sale lane there to handle any exceptions that you can't solve at the lane, but it's not necessary for our solution. But really their job is to monitor the lane, monitor traffic flow, watch the shopper's behavior, look at the lighting to see if the shopper needs help. But the most important thing they can do from a loss prevention perspective is greet every shopper. Hi, my name is Paul. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'm right over here to help. By interacting with the shopper, the chances of that shopper stealing from you at self-checkout are slim to none. If you have a shopper assistant and they're standing in the corner checking their Facebook status, you got the wrong shopper assistant. Get somebody that's personable, that's willing to engage with shoppers because they are your face of the customer. From an employee perspective, you got to have the right one there doing their job. When an intervention does occur, they're going to scan their badge, they're going to do something on the lane, you're going to have an audit trail of everything they did, and hopefully that's a teaching opportunity for them to tell the customer what caused the problem, so maybe the customer doesn't do it again in your store to remove those interventions. If you would like to clear interventions remotely, we do have a product called Mobile Assist that used to be called Mobile Operation Manager in the past. This is where you're going to use a handheld device and you're actually standing in front of the lane. So you're able to clear interventions remotely as if you're standing in front of the lane. Again, not a solution to not have a shopper assistant, but it's an alternative option that you can use if you get in a bind. That's a feature that we make available. There's always a discussion of cash versus cashless, right? And we are more than happy to work with you to figure out what makes sense for your store. Again, this is a per store decision, not a per chain, because you may have stores in some neighborhoods that are heavily cash neighborhoods. You may have some that are not. So again, you got to look at that, but it's always good to look at the percentage of cash transactions versus card only, not the revenue amount, but the percentage of transactions, and determine, do you truly want to turn, let's say, 20% of your cash shoppers away, right? You got to kind of look through that. We can help you through there. Here's just some examples of installs that have been done. So this is McKeever's, great format, right in front of customer service, 6 go lanes in the front of the store, in the middle of the store, right in front of customer service is perfect. I think the only thing missing from these pictures would be some low merchandise racks. Guiding the shopper into that area, some low merchandise racks for impulse items. They may have added them since this picture was taken during the install. But my point is just a perfect install where it's a courtyard environment. They're facing each other. That's kind of what your ultimate goal is. I love to include this one. This is an STCR account in New York City with our previous system 6th generation. But I love it because they were able to cram 11 SCO lanes into a very tight front end. They broke all of our rules when it comes to spacing, but it works perfectly. I've been in the store, customers come in, come out quickly. They no longer have lines going down the aisles. They've really gotten rid of the bottleneck on the front end. So again, that's why I say every store is a little different. Don't assume one size fits all, and we can work with you on what's the right configuration for that. The eBOS, back office system server, ties it all together. So this is a system that either sits in your store or at your headquarter location, and all of the lanes communicate with it. It could communicate offline if necessary, but this is where it's keeping track of the weight database, the quick item lookup information, your shopper assistant IDs, and the reporting. The reporting is the most important part. I know Angel said quite a few of you are using self-checkouts today, which is fantastic news, but I bet you only 20% of y'all are actually using the BOSS reporting, which is a crime in my world. The BOSS reporting is what's going to tell you how your self-checkouts are running, whether you're having security errors, what products are causing those errors. You want to continually monitor that for improvements, continuous improvements. And this is where we work closely with you to make sure that somebody is monitoring those reports. Again, this is more on the best practice side of the presentation. But again, the reporting is key to know the operational use of those lanes. As far as managed services go, this is where we'll roll up our sleeves, and STCR will get to work with you guys on what makes the most sense. We'll help you, we'll obviously get the lanes installed, get the software installed, get the OEM devices installed, train the store, do whatever's necessary to make sure you're going to have a successful launch of self-checkout. All of these lanes are covered just like our point of sale lane by our service techs coast to coast. So again, whether it's same day, next day, whatever service you're looking for, we handle all of the hardware on those lanes to make sure they're going to be running successfully. So really, in summary, this is my last chart. The next step really is to get with STCR, figure out what makes sense for your stores, for your chain. And then we set up a best practice session. And this is where we spend about an hour and a half with the leadership team within your business, with the lines of business. And we really talk about the agenda on the left-hand side, right? Why are we doing this? Why is it important? What do we got to do from a planning perspective? What are the different roles and responsibilities? What's the impact on operations, on labor, on training? We'll give you training information you can incorporate into your training. We talk about layouts, where does it make sense to put them into the store? And then what affects the experience of the shopper, right? Is it the employees inviting shoppers? Is the shopping experience at the time? And then queue management. So one thing I'll tell you this, I'll leave you with this. Self-service does not have to mean no service, right? We know self-checkout works. We have thousands and thousands of lanes installed out there. It works very successfully. I have some clients, 50 to 60% of their transactions are going through their self-checkouts. And I always like to tell a retailer, you're doing it right when you have a line at self-checkout and you don't have a line at a POS lane. And I see that all the time because shoppers like self-service and you want to cater to the ones that do. So we know self-checkout works. Whether it works for you or not really depends on you, right? Whether you want to sit down and get the necessary education to offer that to your shoppers. That's really where the rubber meets the road. So with that, Angel, I will turn it back over to you and take a breath.
Okay, so we had a few questions. So the first question is, what do you make of the changes Walmart and Target have been making for self-checkouts recently? At Target, it was announced they are limiting the number of items to 10.
So this is Paul's opinion. This is not the opinion of overall Toshiba or my peers. I'll give you my opinion. When I look at self-service, my opinion is this, and this is what I've seen over and over again. The more items that you have going through a self-checkout lane, the more chances the shopper has of getting stuck, right? So I always like to say self-service should focus first on express, right? Self-service competes with express lanes. So the first thing I'm going to tell you during our best practice training is convert your express lanes to POS lanes and have your self-checkout be express. So I think what Target is doing is fantastic. I think it's important to leave your large orders to go through a traditional lane, leave your express orders to go through self-checkout. Now, we all know on this call, shoppers don't read signs unless the sign's going to hit them in the head. So even though they put 10 items or less, 12 items or less, we know we're going to have those rogue shoppers that are going to want to go through self-checkout, which is fine. I've seen some retailers do, let's say, 2 or 3, smaller units and 2 or 3 larger units. So it all depends on the store in that neighborhood, right? And what your average basket size is. So I think what Target's doing is great. I think Walmart went to the extreme with doing more self-checkouts than regular lanes. Again, we don't know particularly whether that was trying to save labor or they couldn't find labor, but I think they're throttling it back now and trying to put some regular POS lanes back in there to balance it out. So again, you can't go too far, and hopefully nobody on this call will do that. All right.
Thank you. Our next question is if I want to make additions or design changes to self-checkout footprint today, where should I start?
I think the first start is getting with your STCR account exec and, let's review what you have today, where the lanes are, what type of lanes do you have? Are they small, medium, large, right? What format are they? And then what are we trying to accomplish, right? Are you trying to get more throughput on the front end? Are they in the right location? I'll tell you, the biggest challenge I have with a retailer is trying to convince them to put self-checkouts in the middle. It's because they go to a Walmart or Target, they see them slam self-checkouts on the end. Well, putting them on the end is easy when you have 20, 30 lanes in the middle. Most people don't have that. So again, I would get with STCR. We can sit down and map it out what makes sense. We can create a grid on what it would look like in your store if you were to add more lanes. But I'll tell you that the best thing you can do is if you have 4, move to 6. Because if you do it right and you follow best practices, one shopper assistant can handle up to 6 lanes. Once you get more than 6 lanes, that's when you're probably going to need an incremental shopper assistant. And then you also got to think about, okay, does it make sense to have maybe 2 pods of 4 or 2 pods of 6? Again, depends on how big your front end is, but we can definitely look at that based on your environment in your store to help you with that.
So our next question is, what is the target gold standard for % of transactions through self-checkout retailers should be aiming for?
Good question. I always like to say minimum 35%, right? If you're truly following best practices and you have at least 4 self-checkout lanes, there's no reason why you shouldn't be driving 35% of your transactions, not revenue. That's the biggest mistake people make. Transactions through the self-checkout. Again, depends on how many POS lanes you have, but on average, 35%. Like I mentioned earlier, I have some retailers that are doing 40 and 50% through their lanes, but some of them they're cheating. What I mean by that is they're only keeping 1 POS lane open or 2, forcing long lines, forcing customers to use self-checkout. You really don't want to force them to use self-checkout, but 9 times out of 10, if you have a courtyard, you have 1 line going in like you should, right? A shopper waiting in a POS lane and they see there's availability at self-checkout because they can see over those low merchandise racks, they're going to gravitate towards self-checkout unless they have a huge basket. So I would always gauge it about 35%, and you're going to figure that out by looking at those back office system reports, those BOSS reports that you have.
So our next question is with the produce racks, are you able to choose which cameras to purchase, or do you have to have all of them?
Yeah, no, you choose, you pick whichever ones you want. So for produce rec, it's 1 camera that mounts to the side of the System 7. That's one option. So what we've done with our Alera Security Suite is it's kind of an umbrella. It's a little confusing, but under that Alera Security Suite umbrella, there are multiple solutions. So one of them is the produce rec to recognize produce. The next solution is that overhead loss prevention camera looking down. In the future, we're going to have the bottom of the basket solution. So we're going to continually build out that portfolio of security suite products to work at the self-checkout lane and hopefully at the point of sale lane as well. But you'll continue to see that grow. But yeah, you just have to purchase the 1 produce rec camera for produce rec.
I have another really good question. They want to know, how do you handle own bags or wicker baskets, the bulk items folks put into jars?
Yep. So what happens is with the base software, with the software that ships with the lane, you tell it if you want to acknowledge reusable bags. So whether it's a bag or a basket, doesn't really matter. So what happens is normally what the shopper is going to do, right, is they're going to come to the lane and put their bag or carton or whatever in the bagging area. If this feature is turned on, the screen's going to say, have you placed your own reusable bag or container on the bagging area? And they're going to respond yes or no. If they respond yes, it's going to ask them, how many do you have? That way it can learn the weight of those products. So that way it accounts for that weight prior to the transaction starting, so it knows how many bags you're going to use and the weight of those bags, so it doesn't cause a weight security error. So that's built into the software.
Okay, our next question is, can the produce recognition handle exotic fruits and vegetables that are not widely popular in most stores?
Yeah, so probably out of the gate, no. But it learns, right? It's all AI technology. So our objective here is, we see this a lot in Asian markets, right? It's not a lot of common fruits that they have. So what happens is, over time, right, it learns the product. So let's say after 100 scans of a produce item, we have enough data on that particular produce item and what the PLU number is to lock it into the database. So like I mentioned, about 4 times a year, we're going to come out with a new model, and over time, those models are going to include those items that it couldn't recognize. Because what happens is this: when you place that item on the scanner scale, it's not going to recognize it. But we see what it looks like. So we're taking a picture of what that product looks like. We know what you entered in from the PLU perspective, or you searched on it. So we marry those two together and we send it up to our data scientists. And as they gather that information, that intelligence, it helps them refine the model. So hopefully in the future, it will recognize it. But again, it's not going to recognize everything 100% out of the gate. It's going to learn and get better the more it gets used. Good question.
Okay, I think that might be our last question.
Okay.
So please join us tomorrow. We have an expert from SES that will be going over Vusion electronic shelf labels, explaining how they've changed the retail industry. Again, thank you all for joining us, and I hope you all have a great day.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.